That was His Excellency Hamad Bouamim, the Director General of Dubai Chamber, discussing this week's COMESA Investment Forum. It's time now for a break, but much more still to come, as Twitter plans to celebrate its 5th birthday this week. We'll find out why it's become the voice of the people.
We'll also take a look at the world's richest horse race, the Dubai World Cup, thundering into maiden in just a few days' time. Stay with Emirates 24/7.
Welcome back to Emirates 24/7. With 140 million tweets posted every day, it's difficult to imagine life before Twitter, yet it's only been 5 years since the first tweet ever sang out across the internet.
A social networking site has seen phenomenal growth ever since, changing traditional ways of communication and affecting the way we access and react to news.
On the day of the recent earthquake in Japan, 177 million tweets were posted in just one day.
In this part of the world, Twitter played an intrinsic role in broadening the coverage of the protests in Tunisia and Egypt, spreading information, ideas and rallying public opinion.
Emirates 24/7's Priyanka Dutt spoke to some of the most prominent and active Emirati Twitter users to see how the site has changed the way Emirati youth communicate.
It's the power of the written word like never before. All it takes is 140 characters and an internet connection.
Well, the pen has always been mightier than the sword, but today it is the keyboard on your computer or your phone that has changed the way people communicate. In just 5 years, the 140 characters of Twitter have changed the way people interact across the world. Today, we meet two most prominent Emirati tweeters to see how Twitter has become the voice of the youth.
In Dubai, we meet Sultan Qassemi, social commentator and an avid tweeter. He's got more than 54,000 followers on Twitter, people from across the world who get their very latest Arab and Emirati news from his tweets. During the recent protests in Egypt, Al-Qassemi was tweeting at an average of 75 tweets in 60 minutes.
Initially, my followers on Twitter came mostly from the UAE and the Gulf, which was the area that I was tweeting about mostly. However, since the latest events in Egypt and Tunisia, I've had quite a number of people following from North America and Europe as well.
Not all tweets are political though. Over the past 5 years, Twitter has also played an important role in breaking traditional boundaries and bringing cultures together. And nowhere is this more important than a melting pot city like Dubai.
I feel that Twitter has brought, at least in the UAE, Emirati nationals and expats closer together. Twitter has also played a part in bringing Emiratis closer to each other across the Emirates. We see conversations happening about important items such as the national elections coming up in September 2011. We've also seen people talk about the role of women, people talk about the UAE image.
Across town, we meet another prominent Emirati commentator and an avid Twitter user. Mishaal Gergawi is already known in the UAE for his thought-provoking articles in various publications, but believes that Twitter complements the more traditional ways of accessing news.
Usually when you sit down and write an article, or if you'd watch an interview with someone, they're very processed thoughts. And I think the benefit of Twitter is that it allows you to listen to people's slightly raw thoughts. I don't follow Time or Newsweek or the FT itself. What I do, however, is I follow the editors-in-chiefs of Time and Newsweek and FT. And in that sense, you don't get 15 articles every day of everything that these newspapers or magazines have published, but you get the thoughts behind the people who publish those articles. And in that sense, you get a much deeper understanding than what comes on the cover page.
A 2009 survey showed that almost 40% of all Twitter users in the MENA region were from the UAE, and the figure continues to grow, making Twitter a very important tool for business promotions and feedback.
In the UAE, one of the main areas where I think Twitter has been playing a role and it can play a larger role is customer service. So for example, if you've had a bad experience somewhere, or if you've had an outrageous experience in another place, I think people are very comfortable talking about that on Twitter, and I think other people do take note. And I think as more companies go on Twitter, they will realize the value that an individual experience now can be multiplied, can be shared, and so every client is as important as the next one.
From regime changes to changes in the way business is conducted, from a single tweet with the founder's name in 2006 to over 1 billion tweets worldwide per week, Twitter is one of the biggest success stories of this century. Priyanka Dutt, Emirates 24/7.
Frank Dad chatting to some prominent tweeters there. Well, companies too are aware of the growing importance of social media as a marketing tool, allowing firms to build their brand and connect with their customers for a fraction of the cost usually seen in traditional forms of advertising.
Joining us to the studio to discuss why it's time for companies to embrace social media marketing or risk falling behind is Danish Farhan, the chairman and CEO of Zishay & Co. Welcome to the studio.
Thank you.
All right, now, first off, with 460,000 new users on Twitter on a daily basis, those are staggering figures, and I mean, quite frankly, a staggering reach. Just looking at Haiti, for example, all it took was one tweet to alert the entire world to the disaster. I mean, what do you think is Twitter's new role in promoting businesses and just in terms of informing the world?
I'd like to recap the numbers very quickly. You say almost 500,000 users a day.
Yeah.
Now that's users. Let's talk about what they do. So it's risen to essentially 140 million updates a day. That's close to 1 billion updates a week. So regardless of how you look at it, it is quite a staggering platform. Now the role it plays, gone are the days when people would put in journal entries that were private and really for their own eyes. Today, those journal entries have exploded into tiny little chapters that are 140 characters that happen to be public. And so suddenly, it's the way that people log their lives and start to share what they're doing and what they find interesting.
In terms of marketing, I think it's become such an important tool for businesses, particularly SMEs. Since the global downturn, they're really taking advantage of this free form of advertising when they're trying to cut costs.
There's no doubt that this was about to happen, purely because it's not sustainable to do a billboard campaign for every company or full-page adverts, as you perhaps see in this part of the world. SMEs are going to want to communicate what they do a lot quicker and on a more personal level than an advert will ever communicate. So Twitter allows you to be very personal.
So potentially taking over the more traditional forms of advertising, you'd say?
I would hope so. It hasn't happened yet, purely because of the confusion. There is too much happening, and there's too many experts out there that give opinions that contradict with each other. And as a result, the marketing budgets are under lock and key. So I think once it starts to become a little bit more open and clearly understood, people will start to spend a little bit more money. A classic example, one perhaps that's not relevant here, is Charlie Sheen. You know, celebrities have really taken Twitter to another level. Sad, but also a good example of how advertising on Twitter is going to look. It's going to be celebrity endorsements, really. Okay.
Well, you mentioned Charlie Sheen. There's a potential downside to Twitter, though, because it's essentially you can go out there, say whatever you would is in your mind, and sometimes these numbers and this information could lead to panic. And we just saw last week there's rumors of a plane crash in Malaysia,
yes,
which was a hoax.
Sure.
You know, so if you just take everything you see on Twitter at face value, you know, there's a question of credibility. I mean, what do you think? How can we resolve this?
Okay, I think there's two very interesting points here. The traditional channels of media, where it's still journalists behind it. The journalists, as they're breaking news to their employers, are also breaking news on things like Twitter. So it's really cut the circle down to almost negligible. All right, that's the first thing. Second, what happens is a lot of people start to impersonate or come up with these things just for their 15 characters of fame, as I call it, on Twitter. And there's no real way of foolproofing yourself on something like this. You're going to have to wait and see if there's any credible sources that validate an opinion before you start making up your mind.
So think before you send out those 140 characters.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today. We appreciate your insights this evening.
No worries at all. Pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Now, tell us, do you tweet? Do you use Twitter to follow news, promote your business, or is it just for fun? You can drop us a line at emirates24-7@dmi.ae or send us a message via our Facebook page, Emirates 24/7 on Dubai One.
You can also message us via BBM. All the details are on your screen now.